If you're keeping a reptile in a bioactive enclosure, there's a chance you're not caring for it in the way that you think you are. This trend has really taken over the reptile hobby. Natural materials, a few plants, most importantly, some bugs to clean up the waste. The promise is a perfect ecosystem in a box. It sounds good, it feels good, but is it actually good for your reptile? Well, I'm not at all convinced. I'm going to take you for a walk through a real ecosystem to find out why. The forests around me here are among the most biodiverse places on the planet. This bioregion alone is home to 216 of Australia's reptile species. For the purpose of our discussion, we're going to take a look at the ecology of just one of them, the coastal carpet python. The carpet python is near the apex of this ecosystem. It has a natural range of around 15 square kilometres. That's a huge area, and it actually places it across 3 completely separate vegetation zones. So we have subtropical rainforest to the east, wet sclerophyll forest right here, and a bit further to the west we have dry sclerophyll forest. In this location, with a home range of 15 million square metres, our carpet python has an opportunity to be an interloper across 3 distinct ecosystems. The subtropical rainforest is more ancient than the Australian continent itself. Many lineages of animals and plants here can trace their origins right back to the ancient supercontinent of Gondwana. The dry sclerophyll forests are an ecosystem that evolved far more recently. They're an outcome of the drying out of the Australian landscape and the active management of the land by Indigenous people. The wet sclerophyll forests are an intermediary of the rainforest and dry sclerophyll forest, but also have their own share of unique species, some of which are key prey items for the carpet python. Together, these 3 forest types host a staggering diversity of life forms. This subtropical rainforest provides a cool retreat for the carpet python, particularly during the summer months. There's plenty of flowing water here, and there's also opportunities to hunt for unique birds and mammals that only occur here in the rainforest. The carpet python is one of just a few species of reptile that is active in this area right throughout the year. In the winter months, these western ridges, surrounded by dry sclerophyll forest, are a favourite haunt. Rocky outcrops like this one remain exposed to the sun even as it moves deeper into the north, and that provides plenty of lovely basking sites for the carpet python to use right throughout the winter. In the winter, large tracts of the sclerophyll forest burst into flame. These fires don't happen by accident, they are lit by people. People who are not trying to destroy the forest, but to keep it alive. The plants in this ecosystem won't even germinate unless they're exposed to smoke or flames. In many ways, people have shaped this landscape over many tens of thousands of years through the use of fire. In some ways, it could even be said that this entire ecosystem is an artefact of human activity. In fact, the carpet python will make use of this burned area in the same way that people have for thousands of years. The burned area will be rich in nitrogen. When the rains return, this supercharges the regeneration of grasses, attracting small marsupials like potoroos and wallabies. And those animals will be attracted to this area from many miles around. I reckon this would be a great spot for our carpet python to lie in ambush, waiting for its next meal. By now you're probably getting a feel for just how complex an ecosystem really is. And hopefully you're coming to an understanding that the idea of being able to jam all of this complexity into a small enclosure is simply impossible. So for all of the complexity in the carpet python's ecology, we should ask which part of that is a bioactive enclosure trying to replicate. It turns out the bioactive enclosure is only trying to replicate this, the decomposition of the snake's feces. I have no doubt that the concept of the bioactive reptile enclosure is rooted in a desire to care for our reptiles properly. The idea of using an organic cleanup crew actually evolved from an attempt to replicate one of the most successful devices from the aquarium hobby, the biological filter. Biofilters are parts of aquarium filtration systems where microbial growth is actually encouraged to help break down organic waste. These filters replicate the nitrogen cycle in nature. They break down nitrites into less harmful nitrates. No organic material is actually added to a biofilter. Beneficial bacteria simply grow on surfaces where water and air are in contact. The biofilter system works very well for captive fish, but freshwater fish are species that evolved to survive in small ponds, where they are literally immersed in their own waste. For terrestrial reptiles, there simply is no equivalently effective and safe system to break down organic waste. In fact, decomposition of the snake's poo doesn't even take place in a part of the ecosystem that is of any immediate benefit to the snake. It actually occurs down in a tiny sub-ecosystem, the micro-ecosystem of decomposition. Okay, let's start from the beginning of this process. Anyone who observes their reptiles well knows that when they defecate, they lift their body and tail well clear of their own waste to avoid contamination. The reason this behaviour is so critical becomes clearer when we understand what follows. Let's first consider what a bioactive system claims it is able to accomplish. The claim is that by adding just a few species of springtail and isopod, the enclosure perfectly replicates a natural ecosystem's decomposition process. Right, well, let's now take a look at the number of species actually involved in decomposition in the carpet python's home bioregion. Yes, there are tens of thousands of species involved in decomposition, and the majority have roles that are not even yet completely understood. More than 2/3 are as yet not even scientifically classified. In the wild, our snake will use its excellent sense of smell to continue to avoid what will become a decomposition red zone. The reason it will avoid these red zones is simple, and we should be able to relate to it. The carpet python will stay away from these locations because many of the organisms associated with decomposition are potentially lethal. Remember, our wild carpet python has a range of 15 million square metres, but that doesn't take into account the fact that it is an accomplished climber, spending much of its time in the forest canopy. With an average canopy height of 30 metres, this brings the carpet python's true natural habitat size to 450 million cubic metres. Now let's compare that to an average enclosure. The wild habitat in this case is 200 million times larger than the enclosure. Over the course of a year, our wild carpet python might defecate here, 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 and here. At this scale, it's very easy for it to avoid the decomposition red zones of itself and other animals. The key problem of the bioactive concept is that decomposition red zone avoidance simply breaks down at the scale of an enclosure. In a bioactive enclosure, you are effectively forcing your reptile to live inside the decomposition red zone for its entire existence. Add to this that in captivity, populations of the most dangerous pathogens are still present and able to flourish. Most of these species are naturally present in the atmosphere, in substrate, and in reptile digestive systems. Ask yourself, am I happy to force my reptile to cohabit with high populations of all of these pathogens? Decomposition in ecosystems really does matter. Ultimately, the molecules in this feces will become available to build new parts of this forest. But this is a process that takes months or even years to complete. So the beneficiary is not likely to be our individual snake, but its descendants. In a bioactive setup, our snake would be forced to cohabit with the very decomposer organisms in the wild it would try to avoid. Even worse, in these enclosures, decomposer organisms can build up in unlimited numbers and do not disperse or die off. There's an unlimited supply of feces in there and there's no escape. Are we beginning to see the problem? A reptile kept in a bioactive enclosure is not living in an ecosystem. It's living in its own toilet. Being a reptile keeper involves a lot of responsibility, and in the captive environment, the only organism that should be responsible for cleaning up reptile poo is you. And I'm afraid my issues with bioactive enclosures don't actually end there. Here's just another 4 reasons why I don't do bioactive. Number 4, humidity. Bioactive enclosures are notorious for excessive humidity. Remember, when we're trying to keep more than one species alive, it becomes exponentially more difficult to get conditions right for each. The moisture required to keep isopods alive is often at odds with the requirements of your reptile. One of the most common searches on YouTube is, how do I build a bioactive bearded dragon enclosure? I see thousands of husbandry disasters here just waiting to happen. If you already watched my other content, you'll know how terrible high humidity can be for bearded dragons. Okay, number 3, weeds. While many people mean well when setting up enclosures for their reptiles, the reality is that the plants that often do best in the harsh environment of captivity are often the same species that have actually become environmental weeds. Now, the bioactive enclosure in the introduction was actually a disgraceful attempt at a rainforest setting that I saw recently at a pet shop in Australia. Not one of the plants in this setting is native to Australia, and many of them are actually invasive pests in the very forests they're trying to represent. Don't get me wrong, I love naturalistic enclosures and I love using live plants for recreating the aesthetics of the wild. In future episodes, I'll show you how to design enclosures inspired by real ecosystems, but without the pitfalls of the bioactive trend. Number 2, population explosions. I recently contacted a reptile keeper about purchasing a pair of leaf-tailed geckos. Now, when I inquired about whether he could provide an unrelated pair, he told me he had no idea. His geckos were in a bioactive enclosure and they were breeding out of control. That's the problem you have when you combine decomposer organisms, invertebrates, and you put them in with an insectivorous species. And allowing those geckos to inbreed and to let the population get out of control is just completely irresponsible. That's not an ecosystem, that's an experiment gone wrong. My number 1 issue with the bioactive trend, beyond all of the things that we've discussed, is that it distracts from the things that actually matter. When we design captive environments for reptiles, there's a whole range of critical questions we need to be asking about their lives in the wild. And we need to understand that their natural habitats are infinitely complex. It's arrogant and quite misinformed to think we can build a sustainable ecosystem inside the confines of a captive environment. I take all of my inspiration for my reptile enclosures from the places that they live in the wild. But understanding these places also means understanding that they're by no means easy to replicate. I've spent decades watching reptiles in the wild and designing enclosures for those that find themselves in captivity. And I can say that if we really want to respect these animals, we need to go beyond the trends. We need to start with the most critical aspects of their ecology. It's really good to start that journey from a position of humility. We need to have the humility to understand that captivity is a severely compromised environment. And unfortunately, chucking a few isopods into a box doesn't magically turn it into an ecosystem. And no matter how well designed our enclosures are, we have to expect that we will have ongoing and significant responsibilities in order to properly manage and maintain them. If you want to see what I think are the most important aspects of reptile enclosure design, why not take a look at my other content? And there's a lot more on the way. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.